Here with another author interview sponsored by Women's Rights Publishing and Author Services. Today, I'm chatting with the incredibly intriguing Joanne Hale. Please like and follow our videos on YouTube and support these fantastic interviews by becoming a Patreon patron. So who is Joanne Hale? Joanne grew up in San Diego, and for some reason, maybe she will explain, she packed her bags and moved to Indiana. Joanne was the kid in school with a book in one hand and a notebook and a pen in the other. And even as an adult, this hasn't changed much. I wish I knew you would school, Joanne, because I was the kid who could never find a pen.
I always had them in my ear, tons in my hair. Because I always had, when I was younger, I used to have very long hair. So I always had a bun on my head, and I had like 8, 9 pens poking out of it. So
it's kind of like a way to keep the hair in place.
Yeah, exactly. And I would have like a ton of them. So yes, I'd have been the kid you wanted to know.
You could supply the whole class.
Heck yeah.
Joanne is a collector of Stephen King first edition hardbacks. In her spare time, she gives tours of sunken trains and frequents the Rax Geek Show in Chicago, where I understand you can see a belly dancing Chewbacca.
Yes. It's amazing. And if you live near me and if you email me the next time they open up shows that, probably in July, I will take you with me because I buy 2 tickets every time and I invite somebody new every single month.
Well, it sounds like a pretty cool show.
Oh, yeah.
Joanne's books include self-titled Devils in the Woman, a card catalog, and her work has appeared in the Hollow collections, the Wedding Anthology, and Triangle Writers Magazine. I will post links to all of Joanne's works underneath the video. Please welcome Joanne Hale.
Oh, snickerdoodles. Hello.
Hi. So I was researching your books and I noticed your first one with a publication date of 2020. So what happened a year ago that ignited the author inside of you?
Well, I've always been, okay, I know that being an author means being published, but when I was younger, my mother used to tell me that I was born with a piece of paper and a pencil in my hand. So I was literally writing stories, hundreds of thousands of stories, and I still have most of them here. The rest are in California. And I've always just been writing. And the reasoning why 2020, it has nothing to do with COVID. Actually, my friends all wanted me to put, on my book, the card catalog that was published in 2020, they wanted me to write on it, written because of COVID. And I'm like, no, it had nothing to do with COVID. I wasn't stuck indoors doing this. I was still going to work and freaking doing work and writing. The reasoning why is because, honestly, this is kind of a weird story, but the only reason why I published my story finally was because I got the guts to finally say, I'm going to have someone look at this. So I wrote this short story called Release, and I let somebody read it, and they said this was one of the most amazing stories they've ever read, and I should publish it. So I did. I submitted it to a magazine. They loved it. They published it. But that was my first introduction to publishing. And I did not know that that was a vanity publishing. So I didn't get nothing out of it. So then at that point, I got my stories back after a year, which would have been the end of 2020, which would have been when this was published. I took my stories and I published them as a whole anthology, or what you would call, a collection of my own stories. And it really was just because this one gentleman read my story and wrote me this beautiful email that said this is one of the most amazing, heartbreaking reality stories I've ever read in my life. And when I read that, I cried. And I was like, nobody's ever said that to me to my face. So I just sent it to this magazine. I got it published, yay. But then I just kept going, and then I published it. And actually, one of the things he wrote is on the front of the cover, card catalog. And I wanted to write more of what he said, but one of the last things he wrote was very talented writer on it. And that's his quote that was in one of the emails. And that really stuck with me. And that's literally the only reason why I published something. After I published card catalog, I was like, this isn't that hard. So I took something I wrote when I was 16, which I called self-titled. And it's literally about, you go into a house, apartment that's empty, and you find a notebook underneath the bed and you read it and you find this kid's just misery, this not angsty, because I mean, yes, it's angsty, okay, because it's a teenager, but it's something I wrote when I was 16, and I published that. And all it is just you find a notebook and you read it, and it got published, and that's what it's about. It's just about this one kid, you know. I mean, people relate it to like Catcher in the Rye, but not really. To me, it's as if Catcher in the Rye and Tales of the City had a baby with like Nirvana, and you get self-titled. I don't know how to explain that. And I just kept going from there. That's when I wrote Devils in the Woman. And the only reason why I wrote that, because I wanted to get in touch with myself, not really myself, but my grandmother who passed away. And at the same time, I was trying to get in touch with my husband, who was a big Dead fan. So I was trying to connect all these dots within my own life and create a story of these little dots that I could not connect to myself. And then I just kept going. And I'm working on something now, which actually is in card catalog. There's a short story called Catch Us the Foxes, and I'm turning that into a full-blown novel. It is different than the short story, but just for it uses some of the same characters.
So is your first passion short stories as opposed to writing full-blown novels?
I don't really know. No, I'd rather have a full-length novel because that's what I've always read. I love that. But I write these really amazing scenes, and I just take those as short stories, and that's what I finish, and I leave them there. And then I'm like, oh, I'll just publish this. And then I threw it into the book. Really, I don't have a preference. It's whatever the story tells me. So I take on my characters, Craven, Reynard, the different characters. I'm trying to think, Charles, all the different ones, and I just let them tell me their story. And if the story's only 40 pages, that's what they get. Jujubee was first started off in like one of my little notebooks. I mean, literally, I just sat there and went, "What's a weird name?" And I wrote Jujubee, and then I just kept going. Okay, what's so weird about that name? And then that's when I connected this whole story of my grandmother, stories of my husband and the Grateful Dead. I started looking at like New Mexico and traveling and time travel and all this weird stuff. And it just came from her literally telling me, write my name down, write Jujubee. And I did in a notebook. And that was it. So, and then that's actually a novella. I think it's 48 pages long. Could be a little longer, maybe a little shorter. But really, I don't have a preference. The characters tell me what they want.
I love that, how you kind of channel these. It's kind of like split personalities that kind of channel through you.
Because they don't leave me alone when they're not done, or they quiet up. Like right now, Reynard's was kind of embarrassed, which if you read Catch Us the Foxes, he was a little bit embarrassed to tell me the rest of the story. But now I'm starting to see what actually was happening and why he couldn't tell me his whole story. And that's why it was a short story, because he was embarrassed. And there's more to it. There's these other factions of foxes that are helping, and all these things that are trying to tear down this fascist nation that he has been forced to live in. And so, sorry, fireworks. So he's this fox that's just pushed, they can these pure foxes, these oranges, push these gray ones inside a wall, and they tell the gray ones, you're not pure, you're nothing, you're scum. Here's some wolves. We're going to put wolves in charge of you because we're going to pay them. And he was embarrassed by all this, and he's embarrassed, and it becomes like they become a part of me. They do. Like I like when I wrote my self-titled book, that character became a part of me. I lived him. A lot of that stuff was me happening, and so it's weird.
Yeah, that's great. So you list as your idols Armistead, Maupin, R.L.
Yes.
Stine, and Stephen King. Of course, everyone knows Stephen King. Talk
Yeah,
about Maupin and Stine, and what about their work inspires you?
Well, when I was in the third grade, my mom would let me go to the library. We went there every single weekend, and I was supposed to, walk around the kids section. I never did. I did get the kids' books when I was little, but once I hit third grade, I realized I wasn't interested. And I was reading Les Miserables, The Crucible. I was reading all these big books. So my mom's like, well, why don't you try finding some books in the adult section? I'm like, cool. So I started walking around the aisles, and I kept stopping at this book called Baby Cakes. And the only reason why I kept stopping at it is my grandpa used to call me baby doll. And I kept thinking it said baby doll. And it kept calling to me. And I kept walking by it. And I'd walk again, walk by it. And finally, I did this a couple of times. And then I checked it out. And it was this amazing book about like San Francisco in the 70s and 80s. and the gay culture, and this woman from Ohio called Marianne coming to live in San Francisco with this landlady. And it's just this amazing story. And I read all of them. He's one of my favorite writers. I love his books. I've read them so many times. Tales of the City is the first book. So if you want to read something really good, Tales of the City is the way to go. It is a beautiful, beautiful book. The TV show is good. You can watch that. Read the book. It's amazing. And then R.L. Stein, when you're younger, you read the Fear Street and the Goosebumps. And I walked to the bookstore 2 blocks away every single time there was a new book. And they always had it behind the counter for me. And they'd always, $4.30 with tax. And I always brought that with me to buy the new Goosebump or to buy the new Fear Street. And I just loved those books. There was always something different.
Yeah,
Different characters.
it seems like it really sparked the creative juices inside you. Yeah. So you're also a treasury management professional at a bank. So how does one switch their brain from one side to the other, from treasury management by day to creative author by night?
Well, before that, I was in pharmacy. How does one go from pharmacy to banking? You just have to. You just do. You just are. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. I don't know. I work from 10 to 7. I come home, I write. I get up in the early, I write on the weekends. I write on my lunchtime, on my breaks times. I'm constantly thinking of stories in my head. Yeah, it's just a job.
But your real passion is the writing, obviously.
Yes.
Publishing thing, and we could just start that whole. Okay. So you talked earlier about the whole vanity publishing experience. So now you're an independent publisher, in search of a traditional publisher. What's going on there?
I'm kind of actually in the middle. I kind of really want to go with a publisher. There is one I'm kind of looking at because they're LGBT positive, and I like that about them. But honestly, weirdly enough, I semi-accidentally started my own company by coming up with my own name. I have my own brand name, and I've been looking up how to do it, how to start an LLC. So I might, but I'm still like, that publishing company that's really LGBTQ positive. And I'm like, I really want to go with them. I really like you. You're really cool. But I have this opportunity that might be possible for me. So I'm kind of like right now in the middle. So I'm writing my story, but kind of juggling.
Yeah, it's a hard call, pros and cons for both independent and with a publishing house. Sometimes you expect the publishing house, they're going to do all this marketing, and maybe it doesn't result in
murder is the marketing. You don't realize how much it costs or what you have to do. Right now I know I took kind of a pause. I was paying marketing on Facebook and I was doing some ads here and there, but I took a break because I'm trying to get stock together. I hate having just 1 or 2 items. That's just it kind of looks kind of lame. So I've been trying to get more of a stock. Right now I have 3 books. One's a collection, one's a novella novelty thingy, and then the other one's a short story. And then I'm hoping to go beyond that and get this one done. So I'm trying to get a stock. And then while I'm doing Catch Us the Foxes, I'm actually making products to go with it. I have a symbol for all my characters. I have different, like right now I've made magnets. I've made all these products that I have. So I'm also a crafter when I'm trying to relax and come up with ideas, because if you've ever sat there and you're doing like a big old book with more than like 5 characters, it gets kind of confusing sitting there. Who's who? Now, who was Craven again? Which color was he? Especially when there's foxes and you got color inbreeding and stuff. So I started making my own little magnets out of resin and started putting them up on a board and putting them together with who's dating who hates who's fighting who. So.
Well, I really like that. I don't know that I've talked with somebody that gets that involved in the merchandising.
Oh yeah, this story is taking on a life of its own.
Talk more about the merchandise.
Oh, it's actually really cool. I have it all back here, but I started with just I paid a company to make me a symbol, and they made me this really cool fox symbol, and I was like, that's wicked. So then I just kind of went, wow, that's really cool. So I made a resin character to kind of match it, because I was like, oh, I'm bored, let's just do this. And upon doing that, sorry, it's getting dark, I decided that I wanted to make these cool little characters. So this is Craven. He's my little orange fox. He's the one that in the short story, he does something really cool and really interesting. I don't want to give it away because it's not really part of the story, the novel, but it's part of the short story. It kind of gives it away. But he's a young little fox, and I make all different ones. So there's this one, and there's a solid gray one. Then there's one with gray and orange. There's a cream colored one with some orange flecks on it. Her name's Inari. There's all these different characters, and I put them up on my little board. And then I move them around to what they're doing, where they are. So I don't forget when I get up in the morning, I'd be like, oh yeah, that's where I'm at in the story.
Well,
And
that's really cool.
took
Do you distribute them to your readers? Are you marketing them?
I want to. I started making them just a little while ago. And because it's raining, it's been very hard to pour. With resin, resin's kind of a poison. So you can't really pour it in your house. You make yourself sick. So I've been having to do it in the garage with the door open. It's not a connected garage. So I have it, do it in the garage. I have the garage door open. I have all the doors open. It's well ventilated. I have my mask on. I have my nitrile gloves on. I have the bodysuit on, and I pour it. And it takes me about 45 minutes to make one because I have to pour it, I think, in 8 turns. And each turn takes like 5 minutes to dry or more because it's kind of deep. I mean, it's deep and I use a UV resin. I could use a mixed AB resin, but I do not because I'm lazy. I don't know. It's just, I don't do it.
So how would you describe your writing style?
Mine? I don't know.
I know it's a hard question.
Kind of like I would say intercharacterizing. So I actually take on the character. Very emotive. So I live the character. It's hard to live as a fox, but I pretend, and I try to feel what they're feeling, like when I'm like the character's angry, I go and, I don't yell at anybody in the house, but I sit there, and I yell at the fox that's on the refrigerator or wherever I have my mapping. So, and then I take that and I put this, so that's how I do it. It's emotional, very emotional. I put a lot of emotions in mine. I don't know how to explain it. That's very difficult. I never thought about that. I guess words on paper that when you read it, it's emotional.
No, but I think that's pretty unique that you you immerse yourself so much into the characters.
I live it. I mean, that one that I said self-title, I was taking a lot of those walks he's talking about, that he walked across the bridge. I don't want to give that scene away because it's kind of fucked up, but it's true what happened, walking across the bridge of the trolley and looking down and seeing the trolley or the train going underneath and wondering what would happen if you jumped. Or looking, and then having someone scream at you in a car, I lived a lot of that. So you live it and you're right.
That's great. So you ready for a little story time? We're going to have a little treat for the viewers, and Joanne's going to read an excerpt from one of her books. I'll let you get.
Because we're doing women's, that I was going to stick with, because most of my stories back in the collection were a lot of male personas, and the only female was one who was kind of psychotic. So most of mine were males. I decided to go with my strongest character, who is Jujubee, which is from Devils in the Woman, which is a Grateful Dead reference. Let's see, sorry. Imagine you being my age and running around with a death metal band. Grandmother let out a full hearty laugh. Oh, young and fruitful child, no. The Dead weren't no silly rock band. They were the greatest band to come out of the 60s San Francisco psychedelic wave. Her wrinkles pinched tighter to her eyes as she reminisced. I met some of the kindest people while traveling the country looking for miracles and fresh edibles. That's code for tickets and drugs. Mama! Jujubee heard her mother's disapproval from the other room. I also met your grandpappy while traveling through the desert in Reno. The school bus Green drove, stopped in the middle of the desert, and we played the music real loud while dancing under the stars. Don't feed her those lies, Jujubee's mother stormed from the kitchen, hissing. Your grandfather was a hard-working oil refinery worker. While you were dancing in the flower gardens in the middle of the night, Mama, he was the one who held me when I cried from nightmares. He passed away before you were born, Miranda. She made sure everyone heard her use Jujubee's given name. Miranda's mother stared at her own mother with eyes of fire, frustrated. The old lady would continue to use that made-up name. Miranda preferred Jujubee. but would never admit this to her mother for fear of getting a life sentence stuck in her room. Oh, yes, the oil. The older lady smiled and waited for her daughter to recede back into the kitchen to continue working on dinner and the dishes. He used to come home smelling like a rotten egg sometimes. She forced a laugh. She motioned with her skinny long fingers and crusty yellow tip nail for Jujubee to come closer. Your mother's getting pretty snippy when I talk about my travels and wildness, but I'd rather you hear the truth from me, she whispered. Your grandpappy was not the wonderful man I met when I was already pregnant with your mama, no siree. She arched her neck to see if her daughter was hovering in the background. A pot of pasta could be heard boiling, stirring in the background. You mean grandfather? She tried to whisper just loud enough for the old woman to hear. Is not really mom's dad? That was the first time she heard of any of this. I know that sounds crazy, Ju, but I swear on my mother's chin whiskers it's true. She rubbed her own chin and picked at the skin. Her eyes stared off into another thought. That girl of mine doesn't have the calling like you and I do, Jujubee. What calling? Don't you have weird quinky dinks happen? Like you think something out of place and it happens? Or ultra real nightmares that end up coming true? Or like me, can talk to the dead when the moon's rising? They used to call me a witch because sometimes I knew things. Sometimes I saw things others couldn't. Jujubee stared wide-eyed. Could this be the answer she was looking for? Grandma, she was going to tell the old lady about the magic she thought she had. The music she heard that woke her out of the dead sleep and followed her into the desert. But instead, she kept her mouth shut. This conversation wasn't made for Mama being around.
That's great. I found my sound effects.
Oh.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I was getting flashbacks of my college days from with my roommate who was a huge deadhead himself.
Well, then you'd really like this story because it really makes a lot of references and really goes back to that. And really, I mean, there's a connection between her grandmother and her, and she tries to find it using the music. And that's really what it was about, was listening to the music and finding that aspect and trying to connect to, that older lady who, she barely knew, and you'll find out why she barely knew her and stuff in the story, but she barely knew this old lady. And now she's trying to make a connection when this old lady's telling her, hey, I used to listen to this band. And then she's like, all right, well, what's this band? Plays it and goes,
That's great.
ah.
Yeah, I love any sort of music connection. That's awesome.
Oh yeah.
Well, I unfortunately we're running out of time.
Sorry about
I
that.
so appreciate Joanne Hale. I'm going to put links to all of your work underneath the video and links to our publishing company and sponsor Women's Rights. Thank you so much, Joanne. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, and message me anytime, anybody, any questions. And if you're in the Chicago area, Northwest Indiana specifically, I'll take it a Rax Geek.
All right, that sounds like a plan. Take care.
Take care, kid. Bye.
Bye.